The blood from her feet left crimson tracks in the white powder, each step a prayer that someone might find her before the Rocky Mountain winter claimed what little warmth remained in her body. Juliana Walsh had been walking for 3 hours since the stagecoach accident, her thin cotton dress no match for the blizzard that had descended upon the Colorado territory without warning. The driver was dead, his neck broken in the crash when the wheel had given out on the icy mountain pass. The other passenger, an elderly woman traveling to see her daughter, had died within the first hour, the cold stealing her breath as she sat there in shock against the overturned coach. Juliana had tried to take the woman's shawl, but her fingers were already too numb to work the knot, and something deep inside her refused to strip clothing from a corpse, even to save her own life, so she walked. The road to Fort Garland had to be close. The driver had said so just before they hit the ice. 5 miles, maybe 6. But in a blizzard, 5 miles might as well be 50 when you could barely see 10 feet ahead, and every gust of wind cut through your bones like a rusty blade. Her lips had stopped working properly an hour ago. She could not feel her hands. Her feet were blocks of ice that she forced forward through sheer stubbornness, the same stubborn streak that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. Running away from her aunt's house in Denver, fleeing an arranged marriage to a 50-year-old banker who smelled of cigars and touched her arm too familiarly at dinner. She was 22 years old and had thought herself so brave, boarding that stagecoach with her small bag and the $40 she had saved from years of secret sewing work. Now she would die alone in the snow, and no one would ever know she had tried. The world tilted sideways. Juliana did not remember falling, only that suddenly the snow was against her cheek and it felt almost warm. That was wrong, she knew. When the cold felt warm, death was near. She had heard that somewhere. Her mother, maybe, before the fever took her 10 years ago. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not obey. The wind howled across the empty landscape, and through the white curtain of falling snow she thought she saw a shape. A rider, perhaps, or just her dying mind playing tricks, showing her what she wanted to see. The darkness came up like a wave, and Juliana Walsh surrendered to it, thinking at least the cold would stop soon. Nathan Nordstrom had been tracking the elk for 2 days when the storm rolled in from the northwest, and he knew immediately he had to abandon the hunt and get back to his ranch. 15 years working cattle and living in the Colorado mountains had taught him to read the sky like a book, and this storm had all the markings of a killer. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes, and the wind carried that particular bite that meant the blizzard would last through the night. He turned his horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, back toward home, keeping his eyes sharp for landmarks as the snow began to fall in earnest. His ranch was only 8 miles north of Fort Garland, tucked into a valley that provided decent shelter from the worst winds. He ran a small operation, just enough cattle to make a living, a few horses, and the peace and solitude that came from working land that belonged to him and no one else. At 28, he had already lived more life than most men twice his age, and he preferred the company of animals to people most days. The war had done that to him. 5 years since Appomattox, but some things did not fade with time. Copper nickered nervously, her ears swiveling forward, and Nathan pulled up on the reins, squinting through the snow. Something dark against the white, too small to be a deer, wrong shape for a fallen tree. He urged Copper forward, and as they drew closer, his heart kicked hard against his ribs. A woman, lying face down in the snow, wearing nothing but a thin dress, no coat, no hat, no gloves. Dark hair spread around her head like a fan, already dusted with white. He was off his horse before he had fully decided to move, dropping to his knees beside her and turning her over as gently as his cold, stiffened hands could manage. Young. Pretty, though her lips were blue and her skin had that waxy quality that meant hypothermia had set in deep. He pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse, and found it, faint and slow but present. "Come on, girl," he muttered, already shrugging out of his heavy sheepskin coat. "Do not die on me now." He wrapped the coat around her, and she was so cold he could feel it through his wool shirt and vest. Her dress was damp, her feet bare and bleeding. How long had she been walking? Where had she come from? The questions could wait. First, he had to get her warm. Nathan lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, and stood. She barely stirred, her head lolling against his chest. He whistled for Copper, who came immediately, and with some maneuvering he managed to get himself into the saddle with the woman cradled against him. He wrapped his coat more tightly around her, then opened his own shirt and pulled her against his chest, sharing what warmth his body could offer. "Mine," he said quietly, the word falling from his lips without thought. "You are mine now, and mine do not die." It was something his father used to say, back when Nathan was a boy, and they found injured animals on their old homestead in Missouri. His father would scoop up the broken bird or wounded rabbit and declare it his, and somehow more often than not, the creatures lived. As if naming them, claiming them, gave them a reason to fight, Nathan pressed his heels to Copper's sides, urging her into a careful trot despite the snow and ice. His ranch was still 6 miles away, and night was coming fast. The woman in his arms did not move, did not make a sound, and he found himself talking to her as they rode. A steady stream of words meant to fill the silence and maybe, somehow, call her back from whatever dark place she had gone. "Stay with me. That is all you have to do, just stay. I have a good fire going at the house, left it burning in the stove before I rode out. Probably burned down to coals by now, but coals are better for steady heat anyway. Got coffee, too. Real coffee, not that chicory nonsense. Traded a steer for 5 pounds of it last month. You hang on, and I will make you the best cup of coffee you have ever tasted." The wind picked up, and Nathan hunched over the woman, using his body to shield her from the worst of it. Copper pushed forward steadily, her head down, trusting her rider to guide her home. The world became nothing but white and cold in the fragile weight in his arms. "My name is Nathan," he continued, his voice rough against the wind. "Nathan Nordstrom. I am taking you to my ranch. You are safe now, you understand. You are safe and you are mine, and I do not let go of what is mine." He did not know if she could hear him. Did not know if she was even still alive, but he kept talking anyway, and he kept her pressed against his chest, and he prayed to a God he was not sure he still believed in, that she would survive the ride. The lights of his ranch house finally appeared through the snow, 2 golden squares of window light that meant home and safety. Nathan urged Copper into the barn, swung down from the saddle with the woman still in his arms, and kicked open the door to his house. The fire in the stove had indeed burned down to coals, but the house was still warm, blessedly warm after the brutal cold outside. Nathan carried the woman to his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and laid her down carefully. Her skin was cold as marble, her breathing so shallow he had to put his cheek near her mouth to feel it. He went to work with the efficiency of a man who had dealt with emergencies before. First, he built up the fire, adding wood until flames roared in the stove. Then he lit 2 oil lamps, flooding the room with light. He filled a pot with water from the pump and set it on the stove to warm, then turned his attention back to the woman. Her dress was frozen in places, stiff with ice. He grabbed his knife and cut it away, trying not to think about the impropriety, focusing only on the fact that keeping her in wet clothes would kill her as surely as leaving her in the snow. He worked quickly, averting his eyes as much as possible, wrapping her in every blanket and quilt he owned. Her feet were in bad shape, the skin torn and already showing signs of frostbite. He wrapped them gently, knowing they would need proper treatment once she warmed up enough for him to assess the damage. When she was bundled and dry, Nathan sat on the edge of the bed and took her hands in his, rubbing them gently, trying to bring circulation back. Her fingers were stiff, the nails blue. He breathed on them, warming them with his breath, and continued to rub. "Come on," he said softly. "Come back. You are too young to die out here. Whatever you were running from, I promise you it is not worth this." He did not know how long he sat there, working on her hands, her arms, checking her pulse and her breathing every few minutes. The water on the stove began to steam, and he poured it into his wash basin, testing the temperature with his elbow the way his mother used to do when he was small. Just warm, not hot. Hot water on frozen skin would do more harm than good. He dipped a cloth into the water and began to gently wash the dirt and blood from her face. She had a delicate face, fine-boned, with dark lashes that lay like crescents against her pale cheeks. Young, he had thought when he first found her, and now that he could see her properly, he guessed she could not be more than 20 or 21. What had driven someone so young out into a blizzard without so much as a coat? As he worked, he saw her eyelids flutter. "That is right," Nathan said, his voice suddenly urgent. "Wake up. Open your eyes. Come on, girl. Show me you are still in there." Her eyes opened slowly, and they were brown, a deep, warm brown that seemed too alive for someone who had been so close to death. She stared at him without comprehension at first, her gaze unfocused, and then he saw awareness creep in, followed immediately by fear. She tried to pull away, but she was too weak, the movement barely a twitch beneath the blankets. "Easy," Nathan said, holding up his hands. "You are safe. I found you in the snow, brought you here. You are at my ranch north of Fort Garland. My name is Nathan Nordstrom." She blinked at him, her lips trying to form words. He reached for the cup of water he had poured earlier and held it to her mouth. "Drink, just a little." She managed a small sip, then another, and some color began to return to her cheeks, though she still looked like death warmed over. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, rough as gravel. "My ranch, 6 miles north of Fort Garland." "The others?" Nathan shook his head slowly. "I only found you. Were you on the stage?" She nodded, a tiny movement, and he saw tears begin to slide down her temples. "The driver and Mrs. Patterson, they are dead. I am sorry." She closed her eyes, and for a moment Nathan thought she had lost consciousness again, but then she spoke, her words so soft he had to lean close to hear them. "You gave me your coat. You needed it more than I did. You called me yours." Nathan felt his face heat, suddenly embarrassed. "Did I? I do not remember. You were half frozen. I was just trying to keep you awake." Her eyes opened again, and this time when she looked at him there was something different in her gaze, something that made his chest tighten. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving my life. Thank me when you are well enough to walk. Speaking of which, you stay in that bed and do not move. Your feet are in bad shape, and you are still colder than you should be. I am going to make you something warm to drink." He stood and went to the stove, busying himself with making coffee, trying to settle the strange feeling that had taken root in his chest. He had saved her life. That was all. It did not mean anything beyond simple human decency. Come morning, when the storm passed, he would take her into Fort Garland, see her settled at the boarding house, and that would be the end of it. But when he turned back with the coffee and saw her watching him, those brown eyes tracking his every movement, something told him it would not be that simple. "What is your name?" he asked, bringing the cup to her and helping her sit up enough to drink without spilling. Juliana Walsh. Well, Miss Walsh, you gave me quite a scare. How long were you walking in that storm? I do not know. Hours. The stage crashed. The wheel broke. I tried to help them, but the driver was already dead and Mrs. Patterson just sat there, and then she stopped breathing, and I knew I had to walk or I would die too. Her hands shook as she held the cup, and Nathan kept his own hands around hers, steadying them. You were heading to Fort Garland. Yes. I was going to find work there. I can sew. I am good at it. I thought maybe I could work for a seamstress or in a general store or anything really. Running from something. She looked at him sharply, and he saw the wariness return to her eyes. I do not mean to pry, Nathan said. But a young woman does not board a stage alone in December and head to a town where she has no connections unless she is running from something. Juliana was quiet for a long moment, sipping the coffee, and Nathan did not push. Finally, she spoke. My aunt wanted me to marry a man old enough to be my father, a banker in Denver. He made my skin crawl, but my aunt said I was lucky to get such an offer, that I had no money and no prospects and I should be grateful. I could not do it, so I left. That took courage or foolishness. I nearly died today. But you did not. You are here and you are alive, and come morning we will figure out what comes next. She nodded, her eyes already starting to drift closed again. Nathan took the cup from her hands before she could drop it and helped her lie back down. He pulled the blankets up to her chin and stood looking down at her, this stranger who had crashed into his life like the storm itself. Sleep, he said. You are safe here, I promise. Nathan. Her eyes opened one more time, heavy with exhaustion. Yes, you did call me yours. When you found me, I heard you. He did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just watched as her eyes closed and her breathing evened out into sleep. Nathan stood there for a long time, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle in the stove, and wondering what kind of fool he was to feel protective of a woman he had known for less than 2 hours. But the feeling was there, solid and undeniable in his chest, and when he finally pulled a chair close to the bed to keep watch through the night, he knew he would not be taking her to town come morning. Not yet. Not until he was sure she was truly well. Not until he understood this strange pull he felt toward her, this sense that finding her in the snow had been more than simple chance. Mine, he had said. And looking at her now, her face peaceful in sleep, dark hair spread across his pillow, Nathan thought maybe he had spoken a truth he had not been ready to acknowledge. The storm blew itself out by dawn, leaving the world buried under 2 feet of fresh snow that glittered like diamonds in the early light. Nathan had not slept, keeping watch over Juliana through the night, checking her pulse and breathing, adding wood to the fire to keep the cabin warm. Around 4 in the morning, her feet had started to pain her, and she had woken crying. He had made her drink willow bark tea for the pain and examined her feet by lamplight, relieved to see that while the frostbite was real, it was not as severe as he had feared. She would likely lose a few toenails, but she would keep her toes if he could prevent infection. Now, with morning light streaming through the windows, he watched her sleep and tried to figure out what he was going to do. The practical thing would be to hitch up the wagon, load her into it, and drive her to Fort Garland. Doc Brennan could look at her feet properly, and Mrs. Whitley at the boarding house would take her in. Juliana could find work in town, make a life for herself, and Nathan could return to his solitary existence. But the thought of it sat wrong in his chest. She had no money, no connections, no way to pay for a doctor or boarding house. And Fort Garland, while not as rough as some mining towns, was still full of men who would see a young, pretty woman alone and think she was fair game. He had seen it happen before. Seen women end up in situations they could not escape from because they had no protection, no one to stand for them. "You called me yours," she had said. Nathan stood and went to make more coffee, trying to think clearly. He was not a man who acted on impulse. He had learned caution in the war, learned to measure twice and cut once, as his father used to say. But there was nothing cautious about what he was feeling, this fierce protectiveness toward a woman who was essentially a stranger. He heard her stirring and turned to see her trying to sit up, wincing with pain. "Easy," he said, crossing to the bed. "Your feet are going to hurt for a while. Here, let me help you." He propped the pillows behind her and helped her sit up, and in the morning light he could see she looked better. Her color was improved and her eyes were clear and alert. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I was trampled by a horse," she said, attempting a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you. Are you hungry? I can make breakfast. Nothing fancy, just eggs and bacon and biscuits. That sounds like heaven." Nathan nodded and went to the stove, grateful for something to do with his hands. He could feel her watching him as he worked, and it made him self-conscious in a way he had not felt in years. "This is your home?" she asked. "Yes, built it myself 5 years ago when I mustered out of the army." "You fought in the war?" "Yes, Union cavalry." "My father fought for the Union too. He died at Shiloh." "I am sorry, Shiloh was bad." They were quiet for a moment, sharing the weight of that history, and then Juliana spoke again. "You live here alone, just me and the animals." "I run cattle, have a few horses. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is beautiful. What I could see of it in the dark, anyway." Nathan plated the food and brought it to her, settling himself in the chair beside the bed while she ate. She was hungry, he could tell, but she ate slowly, carefully, like someone who had been taught proper manners and remembered them even in extremity. "I need to tell you something," Nathan said once she had finished. "About your feet." Her face went pale. "How bad? Could have been worse." "You have frostbite, but not severe. You will likely lose some nails, but you should keep all your toes if we can prevent infection. That means you need to stay off your feet for at least a week, maybe 2. Keep them clean and wrapped. A week, at minimum. I know that is not what you want to hear, but if you try to walk on them now, you will do permanent damage." Juliana looked down at her hands, and he saw her struggling with something. "I have nowhere to go," she said finally, her voice small. "No money for a boarding house or a doctor. I cannot impose on you for 2 weeks. You have already done more than enough. You are not imposing. You are injured and you need somewhere safe to recover. This is that place. But I am a stranger. You do not know anything about me. I know you were brave enough to leave a situation that was hurting you. I know you tried to help the people in that stagecoach before you saved yourself. I know you walked for hours in a blizzard and did not give up. That is enough." She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Nathan thought about the question, about the real answer, and decided to give her a truth he could live with. "Because someone should be. And because I have the room and the means to help, so why would I not?" It was not the whole truth, not even close, but it was all he could give her right now. The rest, the part about how something in his chest had recognized something in her the moment he saw her in the snow, the part about how he had called her his and meant it more than he wanted to admit, that would have to wait. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise I will earn my keep. Once my feet are better, I can cook and clean and mend your clothes. Whatever you need. Right now, I just need you to rest and heal. Everything else can wait." She nodded and settled back against the pillows, and Nathan took her plate and went back to the stove, trying to ignore the way his heart had kicked up when she smiled at him. He was in dangerous territory here, letting a woman stay in his cabin, alone with him, no chaperone, no propriety. If word got out, her reputation would be ruined and his along with it. But the alternative was turning her out before she was healed, and that he would not do, could not do. The days fell into a rhythm. Nathan did his chores in the mornings, tending to the cattle and horses, chopping wood, hauling water. Juliana slept a lot at first, her body needing rest to recover from the ordeal. When she was awake, they talked, carefully at first, feeling out the boundaries of their strange new situation, but gradually with more ease. She told him about growing up in Denver, about her parents dying when she was 12, about going to live with her aunt, who had never wanted children, and made no secret of seeing Juliana as a burden. She told him about learning to sew from a neighbor woman, about the small business she had built in secret, saving pennies until she had enough to buy her freedom. He told her about Missouri, about the farm he had grown up on, about joining the cavalry at 17 with stars in his eyes, and coming home 4 years later with nightmares in his head. He told her about drifting west, looking for a place that felt like peace, and finding it here in the shadow of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Sangre de Cristo, she repeated, practicing the Spanish. Blood of Christ, that is a grim name for such beautiful mountains. The story goes that a priest saw them at sunset, all red and gold, and thought they looked like the blood of Christ. I just think they are beautiful. So do I. On the 4th day, Nathan helped her out of bed for the first time, supporting her weight as she hobbled to the chair by the window. Her feet were healing, the swelling going down, but they were still tender and painful. She sat in the chair with a blanket over her lap and looked out at the snow-covered valley, and Nathan saw something ease in her face. I feel like I've been living in a dream, she said, or maybe a nightmare. I cannot quite tell which. Why a nightmare? Because this cannot be real. Kind men who save strangers and ask for nothing in return do not exist, not in my experience. Maybe you needed a new experience. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Nathan felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. Who are you, Nathan Nordstrom? Just a man trying to do right. No, you are more than that. I see it in the way you move, the way you talk. You have seen things, done things. But you are still kind. How is that possible? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, turning her question over in his mind. The war taught me a lot of things. Mostly, it taught me that cruelty is easy and kindness is hard, and the world has more than enough cruelty already. So I choose the hard thing, every time I can. That must get exhausting. Sometimes. But it lets me sleep at night. Juliana smiled, a real smile this time, and Nathan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. This was dangerous. This feeling that was growing between them, fed by proximity and shared stories and the simple human need for connection. He should put a stop to it, should keep his distance, should remember that she was his guest and nothing more. But when she reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his calloused ones, he did not pull away. Thank you, she said, for choosing the hard thing, for saving me. You already thanked me, I know, but I cannot seem to say it enough. They sat like that for a while, hands joined, watching the snow sparkle in the afternoon sun, and Nathan thought that maybe dangerous was not always a bad thing. By the end of the first week, Juliana was moving around the cabin with more confidence, though she still limped and had to rest frequently. True to her word, she had started earning her keep, mending his shirts, darning his socks, cooking meals that were far better than anything Nathan could manage on his own. She had a gift for making the small cabin feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep, adding small touches, arranging things, humming as she worked. Nathan found himself looking forward to coming inside after his chores, knowing she would be there, that there would be hot coffee and conversation and her smile. It was dangerous, this growing attachment, but he seemed powerless to stop it. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Juliana doing mending and Nathan oiling his tack, she asked the question he had been dreading. "When do you think I should go to town?" His hands stilled on the leather. "Are you eager to leave?" "No, but I cannot stay here forever." "People will talk. Let them talk." "Nathan, I am serious. Your reputation, my reputation, is my concern, and frankly, I do not care what the town gossips think. But I do. I care what happens to you because of me." He set down the tack and turned to face her. "Do you want to leave?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling on the shirt she was mending. When she looked up at him, her eyes were full of confusion and something else, something that made his breath catch. "No," she said softly. "I do not want to leave, but I do not understand what is happening here. Between us." "Neither do I. You called me yours. That first night, I keep thinking about that. I remember." "Did you mean it?" Nathan stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling in front of her chair so he could look her in the eye. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I meant it. I did not understand it then, but I do now. Something in me recognized you, Juliana. The moment I saw you in the snow, something in me knew you were meant to be mine. That is insane. I know. We have known each other a week. I know. This does not make any sense. I know." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers trembling against his jaw. "Then why does it feel so right?" Nathan turned his head and kissed her palm, a gentle press of lips that made her breath hitch. "Because maybe some things do not need to make sense. Maybe some things just are." "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I. What if we are wrong? What if this is just loneliness and proximity?" And he stopped her words with a kiss, soft and careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she did not pull away. Instead, she made a small sound in the back of her throat and kissed him back, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Still think we are wrong?" he asked. "I think we are reckless and foolish and moving too fast, probably. But I do not want to stop. Neither do I." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the fire crackling beside them, and outside the wind began to pick up again, promising more snow. But inside the cabin, there was warmth and light and the beginning of something that felt like it might be love. The second week brought more snow and more time trapped inside together, and with it, a deepening of what was growing between them. They learned each other in small ways, the daily intimacies of shared space. Nathan learned that Juliana sang while she cooked, old songs her mother had taught her. Juliana learned that Nathan talked to his horse when he thought no one was listening, carrying on full conversations with Copper about the weather and the cattle and whatever else was on his mind. They learned each other's wounds, too. Nathan told her about the nightmares that still woke him sometimes, the sound of cannon fire and screaming horses that echoed in his head. Juliana told him about the loneliness of growing up unwanted, of believing she was a burden, of wondering if anyone would ever choose her for herself, and not for convenience. "I choose you," Nathan said, pulling her close on the narrow bed they had started sharing, propriety be damned. "Not for convenience, not for anything except that you are you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." That is a dangerous thing to say to someone you have known for 2 weeks. Every moment with you is dangerous. I am just choosing to be reckless. She laughed, that bright sound that had become his favorite thing in the world, and kissed him. They had not gone beyond kissing, both of them holding to that last thread of propriety, but Nathan could feel that thread fraying more each day. He wanted her. Not just physically, though God knew he wanted that too, but wanted her in every way a man could want a woman. Wanted her voice in his house and her laughter in his life and her hand in his for whatever years they had left. It was too soon. It was reckless. It was probably the worst decision he could make. He did not care. On the 15th day since he had found her in the snow, Nathan woke to find Juliana already up, standing at the window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and red. She had her weight evenly distributed now, her feet finally healed enough to walk without pain. "You are up early," he said, joining her at the window. "I wanted to see the sunrise. I have been watching them through the window, but today I wanted to stand for it. Your feet are better." "Yes." "Almost completely healed." "That is good." "Is it?" He looked at her, confused by the sadness in her voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean that now I have no excuse to stay. My feet are healed. The weather has cleared. I should go to Fort Garland, find work, get out of your hair." "Is that what you want?" "No. But what I want is terrifying." Nathan turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Tell me anyway. I want to stay. Not as a guest, not as someone you saved out of obligation. I want to stay as yours. The way you called me that first night. I want to be yours, Nathan, if you will have me." His heart was thunder in his chest. "Are you sure? We have known each other 2 weeks. People will say we are crazy." "Let them. I have spent my whole life doing what other people expected, being who they wanted me to be. I ran away because I wanted to choose my own life for once. Well, I am choosing. I am choosing you if you want me." "Want you?" Nathan laughed, the sound rough with emotion. "Juliana, I have wanted you since the moment I found you in the snow. I have been half out of my mind trying to figure out how to ask you to stay without sounding like a madman. If you are sure, if this is really what you want, then yes, stay. Be mine. Marry me and stay and help me build a life here." "Marry you, unless you object to marriage on principle." "No, you want to marry me. After 2 weeks. I wanted to marry you after 2 days. I was just trying to be sensible about it. Clearly that plan failed." She laughed then, bright and joyful, and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, you reckless, wonderful man. I will stay and be yours and help you build a life, and damn what anyone else thinks." Nathan kissed her then, deep and thorough, sealing the promise, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling like fools. "We should probably go to town," Juliana said. "Find a preacher. Do this properly." "Probably. But there is a storm coming in tonight. Might be a few days before the roads are clear again." "I suppose we will just have to wait then." "I suppose so." They made it through approximately 3 more hours before the thin thread of propriety snapped completely. It started with a kiss by the fire, Nathan pulling Juliana into his lap as they sat in the big chair, and then his hands were in her hair and her fingers were working the buttons of his shirt, and suddenly, waiting seemed like the worst idea in the history of bad ideas. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked, even as he was kissing his way down her throat. "We can wait, do this proper after the wedding. I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. I want you, Nathan. Now, today, I do not want to wait." That was all the permission he needed. He stood with her in his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently, and then they were helping each other out of their clothes, hands shaking with eagerness and nerves and want. "I have not," Juliana started, her face flushing. "I have never, I know. Neither have I." "Well, that is not exactly true, but it has been a long time, and never with someone I cared about like this. We will figure it out together." "Together," she repeated, and smiled up at him with such trust that Nathan felt his chest tighten with emotion. They came together slowly, carefully, Nathan watching her face for any sign of pain or discomfort. There was some. He could see it in the way she tensed. But she also kissed him and pulled him closer and whispered his name like a prayer. And when they finally found their rhythm, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, Juliana's head on Nathan's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked. "None, you?" Not a single one. Good. Because I intend to do that again. Many times. Nathan laughed, the sound rumbling in his chest. Is that so? Absolutely. I have 2 weeks of wanting you stored up. I am going to need at least a month to work through it all. A month, at least. Well, in that case, we better get started. He rolled her beneath him, and her laughter turned into a gasp of pleasure, and outside the snow began to fall again, blanketing the world in white. But inside the cabin, there was heat and joy and the kind of love that burned away everything except the truth of 2 people choosing each other against all reason and good sense. The storm did indeed blow in that night. Another big one that dumped 3 feet of snow and made travel impossible for nearly a week. Nathan and Juliana spent that time learning each other in every way possible, talking and laughing, and making love with the desperate intensity of people who had almost lost their chance at happiness. When the weather finally cleared enough for travel, Nathan hitched up the wagon, bundled Juliana in furs and blankets, and drove her into Fort Garland. The town was small, maybe 300 people, clustered around a central square with a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and a small church. People stared as they drove through, curious about the woman sitting beside Nathan Nordstrom, the reclusive rancher who rarely came to town. Nathan ignored the stares and pulled up in front of the church, a small white building with a crooked steeple. The preacher, an older man named Reverend Hayes, answered the door in his shirt sleeves, a book in his hand. "Nathan," he said, surprised, "did not expect to see you until spring. What can I do for you? I need you to perform a marriage, today if possible." Reverend Hayes raised his eyebrows and looked past Nathan to where Juliana waited in the wagon. "That is a mighty pretty girl you have there. She knows what she is getting into, marrying a mountain hermit." "I am not a hermit. You are absolutely a hermit, but if she wants you anyway, who am I to argue with love? Bring her inside. We will get this done proper." The ceremony was simple, just the 3 of them in the small church, with sunlight streaming through the windows and dust motes dancing in the air. Nathan held Juliana's hands and spoke his vows in a steady voice, promising to love and honor and protect her for all their days. Juliana's voice shook when she spoke hers, but her eyes were clear and sure, and when Reverend Hayes pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, in a proper bed with clean sheets and privacy, though Nathan was fairly certain they scandalized the other guests with the amount of noise they made. He could not bring himself to care. Juliana was his wife now, legally and truly, and he intended to celebrate that fact thoroughly. The next morning they went to the general store and bought supplies, including a ready-made dress for Juliana since she still had nothing but the borrowed clothes Nathan had found for her. Mrs. Carson, who ran the store, was full of questions, and by the time they left, Nathan knew the news of his sudden marriage would be all over town. "People are going to talk," Juliana said as they loaded the supplies into the wagon. "Let them. We have nothing to hide." "I suppose you are right. We are married now, respectably so. Very respectable, practically boring." She laughed and kissed his cheek, and Nathan helped her into the wagon, and they headed home to begin their life together. The winter passed in a blur of quiet days and long nights. They settled into married life with surprising ease, learning to work together, to anticipate each other's needs and moods. Juliana took over the cooking and the household management, which freed Nathan to focus on the ranch. She also started taking in sewing work from town, her skill with a needle quickly earning her a reputation, and the extra money was welcome as they planned for the future. They talked about expanding the ranch, buying more cattle, maybe some sheep. They talked about children, though Juliana said she wanted at least a year to just be the two of them before adding babies to the mix. They talked about everything and nothing, and Nathan marveled at how easy it was to be with her, how natural. Spring came late to the Colorado mountains, but when it finally arrived, it came in a rush of green and birdsong and wildflowers. Nathan took Juliana up into the high meadows to see the columbines blooming, and they had a picnic among the flowers, lying in the sun-warmed grass and watching clouds drift overhead. "I was thinking," Juliana said, her head on his shoulder, "we should probably send word to my aunt. Let her know I am alive and well and married. Do you want to?" "Not particularly, but it seems like the right thing to do. She probably thinks I died in the stagecoach crash. They did recover the bodies. Dr. Brennan mentioned it when we were in town. Your name was not on the passenger list, but your aunt would not necessarily know that. Then yes, we should send word. I do not want her to worry, even if we did not part on good terms." Nathan admired her kindness, her willingness to extend grace even to someone who had not treated her well. It was one of the many things he loved about her. They sent the letter the next time they went to town, a brief note explaining that Juliana had survived the crash, recovered at her ranch, and was now married. A month later, a reply came, forwarded from Denver. It was short and cold, congratulating Juliana on finding a husband and wishing her well, but containing no warmth, no invitation to visit, no expression of relief that she was alive. Juliana read it once, folded it carefully, and set it in the stove. "Well," she said, "that is that, I suppose. I am sorry. Do not be. I have you. I have this life. I do not need anything from her." Nathan pulled her into his arms and held her, and she let herself be held, and they did not speak of her aunt again. Summer brought long days of hard work, cattle to move, hay to cut, fences to mend. Juliana worked beside Nathan when she could, learning to ride, to rope, to do the 100 small tasks that made up ranch life. She was good at it, tough and determined, and Nathan loved watching her grow into her strength. They hired a hand in late June, a young man named Tommy who had drifted west looking for work. He was green but willing to learn, and having an extra set of hands made the work go faster. Tommy slept in the barn and took his meals with them, and if he was curious about the story of how Nathan and Juliana had met, he was polite enough not to ask. Fall came, and with it the first anniversary of the day Nathan had found Juliana in the snow. They marked it with a quiet dinner, just the two of them, and Juliana gave him a shirt she had made, embroidered with his initials on the cuff. Nathan gave her a locket he had bought on a trip to Pueblo, with a tiny photograph of them taken by the traveling photographer who had passed through Fort Garland that summer. "1 year," Juliana said, fingering the locket. "It feels like longer, in a good way, in the best way. I cannot imagine my life without you now. It is like you have always been there, even when you were not. I know what you mean. Feels like I was waiting for you my whole life. I just did not know it until I found you. Until you called me yours." "Until I called you mine," Nathan agreed and kissed her, and they went to bed early that night, celebrating the anniversary in the way they both enjoyed most. In November, Juliana realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, her monthly courses absent, her stomach unsettled in the mornings, but she waited to be sure before telling Nathan. When she finally did, standing at the stove making breakfast, trying to sound casual, Nathan dropped the milk pail he had just brought in from the barn and stared at her. "Pregnant? Yes, I am fairly certain. All the signs are there. We are going to have a baby." "Yes, a baby. An actual baby. That is generally how pregnancy works." Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides and picked her up, swinging her around, laughing like a madman. "Nathan, put me down. You are going to make me sick." He set her down carefully, immediately contrite. Sorry. We are going to have a baby. You keep saying that. Because it is amazing. You are amazing. This is amazing. Juliana laughed, her hands coming up to cradle his face. You are happy then? Happy. I am over the moon. I cannot even put it into words. We are going to be parents. Yes, sometime next summer, I think. Nathan dropped to his knees and put his hands on her still flat belly, his face full of wonder. Hello in there, he said softly. I am your father. I just wanted you to know that you are already loved, so loved by both of us. Juliana felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this beautiful, kind man who had saved her life and given her everything, was going to be a father. Their child would know nothing but love and safety and a home filled with warmth. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Juliana was sick for the first few months, but Nathan was patient, holding her hair when she vomited, bringing her dry crackers and weak tea, doing whatever he could to ease her discomfort. As her belly grew, he became almost comically protective, refusing to let her lift anything heavy, insisting she rest more, worrying about every twinge and ache. I am pregnant, not dying, Juliana said one day, exasperated after Nathan had taken a basket of laundry from her hands for the third time. I know, but I nearly lost you once. I am not taking any chances. She softened at that, remembering. You are not going to lose me. I am tough. I survived a blizzard, remember. I remember. I also remember how close it was. So humor me, please. Let me take care of you. How could she argue with that? So she let him fuss and worry, and secretly she loved it, this tangible proof that she was precious to him, that her well-being mattered. Spring came again, the second since she had arrived, and Juliana's belly was round and full, the baby moving constantly now, little feet drumming against her ribs. They had prepared as best they could, Nathan building a cradle from pine wood, Juliana sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Doc Brennan had come out to the ranch twice to check on her, pronouncing her healthy and the baby strong. Should be any day now, he said on his second visit. Send Tommy into town when her time comes, and I will come as fast as I can. But when Juliana's water broke on a warm June morning, it was clear that the baby was not going to wait for the doctor. Her labor was fast and intense, and Nathan found himself playing midwife, following Juliana's instructions, boiling water and finding clean cloths, and trying not to panic. You can do this, he said, holding her hand as another contraction racked her body. You are the strongest person I know. You can do this. Easy for you to say, Juliana gasped. You are not the one pushing a human out of your body. Fair point. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of hard labor that left Juliana exhausted and Nathan terrified. But finally, the baby came, slipping into Nathan's waiting hands with a lusty cry that was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. It is a boy, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Juliana, we have a son. He placed the baby on Juliana's chest, and she gathered him close, tears streaming down her face as she looked at their child. He was perfect, red-faced and angry and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be brown like his mother's. Hello, little one, Juliana whispered. We have been waiting for you. Nathan cut the cord with shaking hands and helped deliver the afterbirth, then cleaned up as best he could while Juliana nursed the baby for the first time. When everything was settled, he climbed into bed beside his wife and son, wrapping his arms around them both. What should we name him? Juliana asked. I was thinking about my father. His name was James. James Nordstrom, I like it. What about a middle name? What was your father's name? William. James William Nordstrom. It is perfect. They lay there together, the three of them, watching the morning light grow stronger through the windows, and Nathan thought about the path that had brought them here. A blizzard. A woman in the snow. A split-second decision to stop and look instead of riding past. How easily it could have gone differently. How close he had come to missing this, all of this. His entire future contained in the moment he had chosen to turn copper toward that dark shape in the snow. "I love you," he said, kissing Juliana's temple. "Both of you, more than I have words for." "We love you too," Juliana said, and smiled at him, that smile that still made his heart skip. "My rescuer, my husband, my love." "Yours," Nathan agreed. "Always yours." Doc Brennan arrived an hour later, brought by Tommy, who had ridden into town the moment Juliana's labor started. He checked mother and baby, pronounced them both healthy, and shook his head at Nathan. "You delivered your own son." "That is either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever heard." "Did not have much choice. He was in a hurry." "Well, you did fine. Both of them are perfect." The doctor stayed for a while, making sure there were no complications, and then left with instructions for care and a promise to check back in a week. Nathan walked him out to his buggy. "You did good, son," Doc Brennan said, climbing up to the seat. "Not just with the delivery, with all of it. I remember when you brought her to town to marry her, everyone saying you were crazy marrying a stranger. But I see the way you look at each other. That is real. That is the kind of love that lasts. Thank you. Take care of them. You have something special there." "I know, I intend to." Nathan stood in the yard, watching the doctor's buggy disappear down the road, and then turned back to the house, to his wife and his son, to the life he had built from nothing but hard work and hope, and a moment of grace in a snowstorm. The years that followed were good ones, full of the simple joys and small struggles that made up a life. James grew from a baby into a toddler into a boy, dark-haired and brown-eyed like his mother, but with Nathan's steady temperament and quiet strength. When he was 3, they had a second child, a daughter they named Clara after Nathan's mother. She was blonde like her father, with gray eyes that saw everything. The ranch prospered. Nathan and Tommy, who had stayed on and become like family, expanded the herd, built a new barn, added rooms to the house to accommodate the growing family. Juliana's sewing business grew too, and she took on an apprentice, a young girl from town who wanted to learn the trade. They went to town regularly now, no longer reclusive, part of the community. They had friends, people who came for dinner and whose children played with theirs. Nathan even joined the town council, serving as a voice for the ranching community. But no matter how busy life got, no matter how full their days, Nathan always made time to remind Juliana of where they had started. Every year on the anniversary of the day he found her, they would bundle up and go for a ride, retracing the path he had taken that day, stopping at the place where she had fallen. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stopped?" Nathan asked one year, James sitting in front of him on the saddle, Clara bundled in Juliana's arms. "No," Juliana said firmly. "Because you did stop. You chose to stop, to look, to help. That is who you are, Nathan. That is why I love you. I am glad I stopped. So am I, every single day." James, who was 5 now and full of questions, piped up. "Papa, is this where you found Mama?" "It is. And she was sleeping in the snow." "Not sleeping exactly. She was very sick from the cold. But you saved her." "I did. Because you called her yours." Nathan looked at Juliana, eyebrows raised. "Have you been telling him that story?" He asked how we met. I told him the truth. "Mama says you said she was yours before you even knew her name," James continued. "Is that true?" "It is true. Something in me knew she was meant to be mine. So I said it, and I meant it." "That is romantic," Clara said, though at 3 she probably did not fully understand what the word meant. "Yes, Juliana agreed, smiling at Nathan over their children's heads. It is. They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, a family complete and whole and happy. That night, after the children were asleep, Nathan and Juliana sat by the fire, Juliana doing mending and Nathan reading. It was a scene they had repeated 1,000 times, comfortable and familiar. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked suddenly. Juliana looked up from her work. "Regret what? This life? Marrying me so quickly, giving up your dreams of independence and life in town. Nathan Nordstrom, are you being foolish on purpose, or is this a special occasion? I am serious." She set down her mending and came to sit on his lap, her arms around his neck. "I have never regretted a single moment, not one. You gave me everything I did not know I wanted. A home, a family, love, safety, the freedom to be myself without fear. How could I regret that? I just want to make sure you are happy. I am happy, deliriously, foolishly, completely happy. Are you?" "Yes, more than I ever thought I could be." "Then stop asking silly questions and kiss me." Nathan laughed and did as he was told, and later, much later, as they lay in bed together, he thought about the path his life had taken. The war that had broken something in him. The years of drifting, looking for a place to belong. The choice to settle here in this valley on this land. And then the blizzard, the woman in the snow. The moment everything changed, he had called her his, not knowing what he was saying, not understanding the weight of that claim. But it had been true anyway, some deep part of him recognizing what his mind had not yet grasped. She was his and he was hers, and nothing that came after could change that fundamental truth. "Mine," he whispered into the darkness, and beside him, Juliana stirred and smiled in her sleep. The children grew. James became a young man, tall and strong, with his father's steady hands and his mother's kind heart. He worked the ranch alongside Nathan, learning everything he could, already talking about the day when he would take over. Clara grew into a beautiful girl, sharp and clever, with a gift for numbers that Nathan recognized even if he did not fully understand it. She talked about going to Denver to study, maybe becoming a teacher, and though it pained him to think of her leaving, Nathan supported her dreams. They had 2 more children, another boy and another girl, rounding out their family to 4. The house was always full of noise and laughter and the chaos that came with children, and Nathan would not have traded it for anything. When James was 21, he married a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and Nathan and Juliana became grandparents. When Clara was 19, she did go to Denver, and she did become a teacher, sending long letters home about her life in the city. The 2 youngest were still children, running wild on the ranch, getting into trouble, learning the land the way their siblings had. Nathan turned 50, then 55, and his hair went gray and his hands became stiffer with arthritis. But he still worked the ranch every day, still rode out to check the cattle, still felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. One evening, sitting on the porch with Juliana, watching the sunset paint the mountains, she took his hand. "You remember what you said to me? That first night, I said a lot of things. You will have to be more specific. You said you were mine and yours do not die. I remember." "Do you still believe that?" Nathan turned to look at her, seeing the lines time had carved into her face, the silver in her dark hair, the brown eyes that still made his heart skip. "I believe it more now than I did then. You are mine, Juliana. You have been mine since the moment I found you. You will be mine until my last breath and beyond." "Good," she said, smiling, "because I feel the same way. I am yours, Nathan Nordstrom. I have been from the beginning." They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching the day fade into night. The ranch spread out before them, the land they had built a life on, the legacy they would leave to their children and grandchildren. Inside the house, they could hear voices, one of their younger children arguing with their sibling, the normal sounds of family life. "We did well," Juliana said softly. "Yes, we did. I am glad you found me, glad you stopped. So am I, every single day, even when I am old and gray and not as pretty as I used to be." Nathan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are more beautiful now than you were the day I found you. You are my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in all things. You will always be the most beautiful woman in the world to me." Juliana leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars come out, one by one, filling the vast Colorado sky with light. They had started with nothing but a moment in a blizzard, a choice to stop and help, a reckless decision to follow their hearts instead of their heads. And from that moment, they had built everything: a marriage, a family, a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. Nathan thought about the young man he had been, broken by war, drifting through life without purpose or hope. He thought about the woman he had found in the snow, fleeing a life that was suffocating her, nearly dying in her bid for freedom. And he thought about the life they had made together, not perfect but real, full of joy and sorrow and all the messy, beautiful moments that made up a human existence. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For collapsing in my path, for giving me a reason to stop, for choosing me." Juliana laughed, that bright sound he had fallen in love with so many years ago. "Thank you for wrapping me in your coat, for calling me yours, for giving me a home." "Always," Nathan said. "You are mine and I am yours. Always." They sat together on that porch for a long time until the cold drove them inside to the warmth of the fire and the comfort of their bed. And when they finally slept, they slept wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had every night for 34 years. Nathan Nordstrom died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, Juliana beside him, their children and grandchildren filling the house with love and grief. Juliana followed him 2 years later, her heart finally giving out, worn down by time and missing her other half. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the vast Colorado sky they had both loved so much. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, to tell stories about the love that had started in a blizzard and lasted a lifetime. James, now an old man himself, stood at the graves and told his own children about the day his father found his mother in the snow, about the coat that saved her life, about the words that bound them together. "He called her his," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Before he even knew her name, he called her his, and she was. They belonged to each other in a way I have never seen before or since. That is the kind of love I want you to remember, the kind that stops for a stranger in a storm, the kind that chooses to take a chance even when it is reckless, the kind that lasts beyond death itself." The family said their goodbyes, and one by one, they drifted away, back to their own lives, carrying with them the story of Nathan and Juliana, of love found in the most unlikely moment, of two people who chose each other and built a legacy that would endure for generations. And on the hill, under the endless sky, two names were carved in stone, side by side, exactly as they had lived. Nathan Nordstrom, 1826, 1894, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Juliana Nordstrom, 1827, 1896, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. Beneath the names, a single line, added by their children as a testament to the love that had started it all. She was his. He was hers. Always. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each one adding to the legacy, each one knowing the story of how it all began. In winter, when the snow fell thick and white, they would stand at the windows and remember. They would think about a woman walking through a blizzard, about a man who chose to stop, about a moment that changed everything. And they would be grateful, because without that moment, none of them would exist. Without that choice to stop, to help, to love recklessly and completely, there would be no ranch, no family, no legacy. There would just be snow and silence and a story that never got told. But Nathan had stopped. He had wrapped her in his coat. He had called her his. And from that single moment of grace, an entire world had been born. Years turned into decades, and the story became legend in Fort Garland. Old-timers would sit in the saloon and talk about Nathan Nordstrom and his wife Juliana, about the love story that had started with a blizzard. Young couples would visit their graves before getting married, believing that touching the stone would bring them luck and love. The ranch stayed in the family for over a century, a testament to what Nathan and Juliana had built together. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he found her, the family would gather at that spot on the road, now marked with a small plaque, and they would tell the story again. They would talk about courage and choice, and the power of two people deciding to build something together. They would talk about love that started in impossible circumstances and endured through everything life could throw at it. And they would remember that sometimes the most important decision you can make is to stop, to look, to help, to claim someone as yours and mean it with your whole heart. Because that decision, that single choice made in a moment of grace, can change not just your life, but the lives of everyone who comes after. Nathan and Juliana's story lived on, told and retold, a reminder that love is not always convenient or sensible or easy to explain. Sometimes it is reckless and fast and born in the most unlikely moments. But when it is real, when it is true, when two people choose each other completely and without reservation, it can create something that lasts forever, a legacy, a family, a love story for the ages. And it all started with a blizzard, a woman in the snow, and a cowboy who stopped, who wrapped her in his coat, who called her his, and meant it.